Hey, what's going on, guys? So I have been known to make spreadsheets that are very usable and pretty or well laid out or anything like that. So um, I've had a few requests to make a video, kind of like an introduction to Excel and going over some techniques and how to create something like this yourself. So this is going to be the final product that we'll create today. And over the course, we'll learn a bunch of things about Excel. We have this is how it will look. This is how you can generally present it to an athlete. This is probably more detail than most people need, but if you can make something like this, you can make much simpler versions as well. So what do we have? We have up to 6 days that someone can use. Day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to program. And additionally, in this one, instead of giving, for instance, for squats, just a simple 3 sets of 5 or something like that, you can give multiple lines of instruction to an athlete, have them work up 1 by 5, 1 by 4, 1 by 3 to their top set of 5 by 5 or something to that effect. Loads will auto-calculate. They'll put in their last set RPE, and an estimated 1 rep max will populate based off of that. In addition, we've got a few things hidden from the athlete here. Some volume calculations, and up in the top here we have hidden some graphs and some usable data here for you. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to make this, and we're going to do it starting with a very blank sheet here. So there's a few things we'll need. Number one, what is Excel? Excel is a spreadsheet-based program that allows you to lay things out and mostly work with numbers in a usable format. So we can do things like 4 and 5, and we can do things like equals 4 plus 5, and we can get 9, or we can do things like equals. And now the cool thing about Excel is we can reference cells. So I can reference this cell, E4, and it will always reference this cell here, E4 plus E5, so it will take whatever's in this cell and it will add it to whatever's in this cell, and I hit return and it gives me the answer there. The nice thing is, if I want to change this formula, I've got to go up here and actually change the formula itself by changing this to a 7. However, I can just update this to a 7 and it will automatically change any formula that references this cell. Now, these are called relative cell references. Here's why. Let's put two numbers here, and let's just say this is 2 and 3. So let me copy this and bring it down here. If I paste it here, is it going to show 11? No, it's not. Because these are relative cell references, it's going to refer to the cells that are in relation to this cell. So up 1 over 1 is going to refer in our original case to F4. Now up 1 over 1 is going to refer to F7, the new cell. If we want to prevent that from happening, let's call this let's give these new numbers, 2 and 9. That's a cheating example. Now if we want that not to happen, we're going to have to use absolute cell references by using the $sign. So I'm going to always want this refer to, the same cell. I put $signs in to tell it to refer to these cells always. Now if I copy this and paste it, I see that it's still referring back to the original E4 and F4. So those are absolute and cell references, and they help in a bunch of different ways, as we'll see later on. Okay, so let's familiarize ourselves. We've got different rows and different columns. We can format things by one of two ways. I can right-click the cell, and I can click Format Cells. I have these convenient options up here at the top that I can work with, and some preset ones as well. Or I can press Apple 1, which is the same as going to Format Cells, and I have all these different options for things I can do. As far as the text in the cell, I can make it a number, a percentage, a $sign, etc. I can change the alignment to center, right justified, left justified, change the text to vertical, wrap text, etc. Change the fonts, change the border, change the fill of the cell, or lock cells. For coaches, locking training programs so that your clients don't mess with things unintentionally is oftentimes a good idea. So let's get to work. let's start off by putting in the athletes' 1 rep maxes, since this was a program that calculated based off of 1 rep maxes. So we have squat, bench, deadlift. We want these numbers here. And handily here, we have a formula that calculates the 1 rep max. And I copied this over, but you can find this formula available to you. Except we don't want G4 and H4 in this case because we want it to line up with this cell. So let's make it 3 and 3. Okay, so what does this mean? It's referencing these 2 cells. This will be load, and this will be reps. So for instance, if I put in 225 by 1, great, gives me 225. If I put in 225 by 5, well, I've got some estimated 1 rep max there. For our case, this number of decimal places is just unwieldy, and we don't need it. We can use these 2 buttons to shift the number of decimal places. In fact, only 1 decimal place is probably what we need. Okay, now, those relative cell references are great because I can drag the corner here all the way down, and now these will reference the same cells in their row, which is exactly what we want. This saves work, so we don't have to enter the formula in on each new column. Now, as far as formatting goes and making things look nice, we're going to start doing that, and it's one of the things that separates good spreadsheets from better spreadsheets is formatting. So it'd be nice not to have these right next to each other. So we're going to put in, by right-clicking here and clicking Insert, we're going to insert a row. And now we can start to format things. So I'm going to highlight these cells so I can format them as a group. Press Command 1 and go to Border. And I like this border because it's very non-intrusive. And I can select all of them, and I can just click on the lines that I want here. I can click even diagonal angle lines for boxed out, but this is going to work for our purposes. Okay, so there's a few things as a beginning Excel user that we want to do. Number 1, go to Preferences, and as far as error checking, we want to turn off a few things. We want to turn off flag numbers formatted as text, flag unlock cells, and flag formulas that refer to empty cells. That's the first thing that will allow these spreadsheets to look better. Second thing is to go to Layout and unclick grid lines under View. There we go. No more grid lines means that we've got to format the way that we want everything to look. This looks much more like a blank page, something that you'd print out. So we want this formatting over here, and the easy way to do that is to copy these and click here and right-click Paste Special. And we only want to paste the formats here. So it didn't change the formulas at all, it just changed the formatting. Let's undo that. Another way of doing that is to copy this, click here, or you can click all of them and click Paste. Now we have a little context menu that pops up. Notice that it copied 225. We don't want that to happen. So click this, and we've got some options here. You can use all of these in due time, but we want it to formatting only. There we go. So it's copied the formatting. Now we can change column and row width and height. We're going to bring this closer, and we're going to take these and bring them closer. So getting a little bit nicer. Now we don't want these justified to the side, so let's do this. Let's left justify this. Let's right justify this. Let's put a small X in between, so we have 225 by. Okay, let's take this same formatting and let's put it around these guys. By clicking formatting only, right justify these, maybe bold, maybe bring these closer to each other, and let's label this estimated 1 rep max. Also, we want those back down. So that looks pretty good to me. Okay, let's talk formulas a little bit. We've got zeros here because obviously there's nothing over here, but that's a little bit ugly, right? I mean, we could do this. We could just put 100 by 1 and just have you fill this in for the athletes when the time comes. That's one way of doing it. As we'll see later on, we can use a few different formulas to build out the formulas that you already have to get rid of error codes and nasty numbers and NAs and values and weird other errors. Okay, so we've got this. Now, it'd be a good idea at this point to name these cells. So right now, the name of this cell is E3, but we can give it a name that's a little bit more intuitive, more natural language, so that we can refer back to it later on. So let's call this SQ max for squat max. Let's call this BN max for bench max. And let's call this DL max for deadlift max. Now, if I go to any cell and I type in equals SQ max, it's going to give me that number. So it's going to refer to that cell by a more natural name. Okay, that's going to make formulas a little bit easier to build later on. All right, so now we want to get started on some actual layout stuff. So let's leave some empty cells, and I believe I started this down on row 24D, somewhere around here. This isn't really so specific. It's not going to change things. So right, let's do this. Let's start off with some labels. So let's go sets, reps, percentage of 1 rep max, load. These may be the training variables that you're giving to athletes. Let's make this a little bit wider so we can see that it says the labels there. Okay. Unfortunately, in Excel, you can't change column width in one place and leave it a different width somewhere else. It changes it for the whole column, so that will restrict you in some senses. All right, and let's give ourselves another one that says, for now, exercise. And we can delete this later on. Okay? All right. So let's make that wider as well. Oops. All right. So, for example, let's go squat, bench, dead, lift. This will allow us to do a few things. Now let's start to add a little bit of formatting. Plain text on white text, or black text on a white background, is not the most appealing. Luckily, Excel comes equipped with theme colors, which is kind of nice. So you have theme colors and you have gradients of those colors. So we can go with a very light gradient all across. For this one, let's go with this kind of a light aqua, and then we're going to offset that with a white. I think that would look good. So that's going to be the color that we choose. So we're going to select all these cells. I'm going to press Apple 1 for formatting. I'm going to go to fill. We're going to choose a background color. We're going to choose that light blue we talked about. And we're going to also paste that fill here. Formatting only, remember, and here. So we have potentially 5 places that we can have an athlete, well, that we can program exercises for an athlete. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. So let's add some borders so that we can distinguish now between the columns. Let's go to borders, and let's go with white, and let's just add in some of these vertical lines here and see what that looks like. Okay, that looks pretty nice. Hopefully you guys can see that now we have a little bit of separation there between these cells, and it's not so intrusive. Now we need to do a little bit of formatting. I think it'd be good to have these right aligned, to have these all actually center aligned, and possibly these labels up here italicized. Okay, so now I can give an athlete a number of sets and reps, maybe a percentage of 1 rep max. And now if we click all of these and we go up here to number, this would be the same as going to the formatting panel. I'm probably going to want these as percentage. That way, if I just type in a standard number, I'm just pressing 7.5, it's automatically going to assume that's a percentage. Now, what are these pound symbols? Well, this just means that there's not enough room in the cell to display the full value. So we need to make the cell wider to show the full value. Now 75.00, probably not needed. Let's drop 1 decimal place off of that. maybe even 2, but we'll leave it as 1 so we can put in 77.5 or something like that. Okay. Now as far as load goes, we'll get back to formulas, and I want this load to always reference this cell, but I want it to reference this percentage. So let's say equals, in this case, squat max times is this little asterisk above your 8 on your keyboard. We want it to reference this cell. Okay, so there's my load for the day. And again, we'll format all of these to have no decimal places. There's different ways of doing this. So here now is where things get interesting. 76. Well, 192 isn't really a load that we can load on the bar, so we're going to add a formula to here. We're going to add the mround formula. mround, open parentheses. What does this do? This takes whatever we're trying to calculate and rounds it to the nearest multiple, in this case 5 pounds. So now it will give me 5 pounds, 77, 195, 76, 190, 76.5, 195. So you can see now that it's only going to round to the nearest 5. All right, so we're getting somewhere. This is nice. Let's go on. We want some specific volume calculations that do some really nice things. To do that, we're going to have to be able to tell Excel that an exercise is squat, bench, or deadlift related, at least in terms of powerlifting. So we're going to add a label column here, and I'm just going to call this label. Later on, we can totally remove this. So we want this to say squat, bench, deadlift, and let's make these tiny labels. So let's go 9. There we go. And for our sake, let's call this pause squat, and let's call this deficit deadlift. So now we know that we have exercise and we have the label of what it's like. So now we can get a little bit more specific. Let's add a column for the athlete to track last set RPE. Maybe we want that to happen. I'm going to copy these formats over. Remember, I want formatting only. And let's bring this a little bit closer. Okay, so looking good. And maybe we can call this day 1. And you can play with the formats to your heart's content. Okay, so doing quite all right now. And what do we need now? We need a way to track volume, right? So we can hide some cells so that athletes won't see them. Let's just put in bench, squat, deadlift. If we don't want an athlete to see these, I can simply click here to select one column, or I can drag across to select all of them. Right click and click hide. And they didn't disappear, they're hidden. So now we have N going straight to R, but we know that the letters are still there, and we can tell that there's hidden columns there because they're blue. But if I click these again and I click unhide, all the data is there, unharmed, still there. So very useful tool that we can get a lot of calculating done, but make sure the athlete doesn't see it because it's ugly. So let's start doing some stuff here with volume. Let's have a squat volume, a bench volume, and a deadlift volume. Okay, so now how do we calculate volume? Well, we need sets times reps times load. Pretty easy in this case. Sets times reps times load. So this is my total poundage. And I can click this and drag down, and since we use relative cell references, this is going to refer to the ones next to it, and the ones next to it, so on and so forth. But how is this going to refer to squat? We don't know that. Well, now we have to introduce something called if-then statements, or if statements. They're very powerful tools. Essentially, we want Excel to be able to say, if this says squat, then put this volume here. If not, do something else. So that's what we're going after. So now I'm going to delete all this stuff, and I'm going to say equals if open, hopefully you can see up here, equals if this cell, E24, equals, open parentheses, squat. So if it equals squat, that's my logical test, that's what it's testing for, then do what? Well, then do the volume. This times this times this. Comma, so that's my value if true. If it's not true, if it's false and it says something else like bench, deadlift, well, we don't want to put anything there. So we put two sets of parentheses for open, close, and we close the formula. So great. How do we test that? Well, there's a few ways. I can change this to bench and see what happens. No volume. Great. So what do you think we're going to do for this one? Well, we do the same formula, except we want it to be equal to the word bench. If not, then put nothing. So let's go ahead and copy this formula. Now, if I just drag this over, one, to copy, what's going to happen? Well, since we use relative cell references, it's going to refer now to the wrong columns. Now it's referring to this column with the exercise name. That's not what we want. So let's delete that. What we actually need to do is go in here and select all of this and press Apple C for copy, Control C on PC, and paste it into this cell. Now all we need to do is change this word squat to the word bench. Now let's test it. If I say bench, let's spell it correctly. So we can see that it shifts the volume into the right column. Why is this important? Well, somewhere down here we'll do a sum formula equals sum, and then we'll just select all of these and it will give me the sum total of squat volume that we can use to compare week to week, compare month to month, or make graphs of, kind of different purposes. And finally we would do for deadlift. And then since we really don't want the athlete to see them, they're just numbers, we can hide all of these from the athlete. Okay? You can even hide these labels if you want to, but I find keeping them up makes things easier for me. Also, if you wanted, you could use another label here to plan things, calling something a hypertrophy movement, power movement, strength movement, heavy singles, whatever you want, so that kind of helps create programming. So we're doing all right now. What we could do now is copy all of this, and actually we would unhide these, so we can copy these formulas down as well. Copy all of these. I'm leaving a blank one in between. So now we have a 4-day possible program with 5 possible exercises here, sets, reps, percent one or max, load, etc. We're doing all right. Obviously, we'll change small details here, like the day, maybe even formatting. Let's make this a little bit bigger, and let's make it bold. Let's make all of these labels italics, maybe even a little bit smaller so they're not so noticeable. Let's italicize these, possibly bold the exercise names. We want all of them that way. Okay, looking pretty good so far. Let's complete this so that we have everything. Remember, copy, go over another, paste. Let's make this deadlift. And now we can drag down. Drag down, drag down. Okay. Now what? Well, let's drag this all the way down so we have for everything. All right, a good start so far. So there's our program. Why do we have all this empty space up here? Well, this will be a space for us to put in some graphs. So let's go ahead and get those sum formulas down here, and we're actually going to have to put in some things. So let's call this bench 5x4. Remember, this is not a program I would ever suggest someone run. We're just putting in random things here. Okay. So we've hit something where we need another formula. Well, this M-round squat max, that formula was fine. If we knew that this was a squat, we want things to be a little bit more automated, so we don't have to go in here and change SQ max to BN max for bench every single time. So we're going to have to build things a little bit. with if formulas. Okay, so equals if, oh, we already had one, if this cell says equals squat, then we want it to use the squat racks, right? Now we can nest if formulas. We can say if it equals squat, then do this. If it equals bench, then do this. If it equals deadlift, do this. If it's none of those, then do something else. And we do that simply by putting it in the place of the value if false. So there's my value if true. Okay. Now I put in another if formula. If the same cell E24 equals bench, let's put it in quotations. Then what? Then round bench max, BN max, times this same cell, I24, round it to the nearest 5. So far so good. And finally we need one for deadlift. If, open parentheses, E24 equals deadlift, M round DL max, the deadlift max, times this cell to the nearest 5. Now all we need to do is close all of our parentheses. And you can see that this formula builder will help. Close, close, close. There we go. So the great thing about that now is if I want this to be squat, hey, the load auto-populates. If I want this to be a bench movement, the load auto-populates. And if I know it's a deadlift, the load auto-populates. Why is it 0? Well, we didn't put in any information for our 1 rep max here. All right, so we can see how useful that is. We would simply copy this formula down here. Here's another useful thing. Now I want to copy the formula down, but I don't want to mess up all this nice formatting we have. I'll take this, I'll copy it all the way down, and see how it totally destroyed the formats. I want to click this now, and I want to say fill without formatting. There we go. So we're doing a lot better now. Now I simply have to get rid of this nonsense stuff here in between. And I want to add these labels back. Load, load, load. Okay, so we're doing pretty good. We can clean this up a few more ways. I don't like to see these zeros here when we don't have any data entered, especially when there's not even exercises here. So we can do something else by adding a simple formula that says if there's no value there, then leave it blank. And if there is a value, then go forward. So something like nesting this in a formula that says if this cell equals 0, then leave it blank. So that's something we could add as well. And I can show you how to do that later on, but I think we've got quite enough on the plate right now. All right, so these numbers aren't just floating. We're just going to put in some simple formatting. Let's get our nice blue color, and let's put some boxes around. That is faint, but fine, since this is pretty inconsequential stuff, and I'm going to center all of this data. And maybe, we can format columns together, so I'm narrowing all of the columns at the same time. All right, looking good. So, so what else? We want to duplicate this over a number of weeks, and we'll add a few more constraints here. So let's talk about how to group rows and columns. This is a very useful feature, and we'll see why. First, let's do this so we have this a little bit closer. Now we have some data. Maybe we want to add another column for notes for the athlete to take some notes. And in a later video, we'll show you how to do estimated 1 rep maxes, I believe, based off of the RPE chart. So I'm going to select these. I'm going to go up here to data, and I'm going to hit group. Now these are grouped. Essentially, it allows me to hide and unhide them with just a click of this button. What it also allows me to do is hide and unhide multiple groups together at the same time. So let's let's first paste this formatting down to all of these. So I'm going to select all of these, paste, but I only want it to do the formatting. Okay, now when I copy this across, we'll be doing much better. Let's make this a day 4, and we're doing quite all right. Okay, so let's select this stuff, let's copy, and let's put it over here. And we don't want this stuff up here, so there's a few ways we can do this. If I want to delete this, it's asking me to shift cells a different direction. Why is that? Well, you can't really delete cells unless it's replacing them with some cells. You can think of it kind of as tiles in that case. It has to take the tiles from somewhere else. I could simply just remove all the data from these cells. That's one way of doing it. But another way is to delete them. And if you delete, you have to make sure that it's taking the cells from somewhere that's not going to mess things up that you already have. I want to shift cells left. So it's going to take these cells over here and shift them left. And that's not going to mess anything up that we have. All right. So, doing pretty good. We've got these hidden, and the nice thing now is if I click this button here, these 1 and 2, one will collapse both of these together so that we don't see it, and that's really nice. So now we have the volume calculations all together, and we can hide them with just the press of a button, and view them with the press of a button too. All right, so far so good. Let's also group these cells up here all together, or these rows, clicking this button. That way I can hide them as well, and we've got a nice usable. Actually, you know what? I don't like that so much. Only because it's a little bit tight to the top there. So we're going to ungroup these, and let's go a little bit higher here. So let's try that. Now we have a little bit of a gap there. It's a little bit nicer, so you're not all packed up in the corner. Things are displayed a little bit nicer. Now we can collapse these. So, all right, we're doing good. Let's get 4 weeks here. So copy, paste, and paste. We got 4 weeks. Let's collapse them. Now let's view what we've got. We've got the same movements across the board. That's nice so far. A few things we can do now, and I'm going to use the zoom function here to view this data all together. What are these dotted lines? Well, that's where I copied from, and if you just start typing anywhere, it will get rid of those. Those are non-permanent lines. So what I'd like, at least for the start of programming, is for all of the weeks to refer back to the first week. So I make a change on week 1, I don't have to go through and make the same change on each one. Say I want pause squats, but maybe for this athlete, I don't want pause squats. I want split squats or something like that. Well, great, it changed it, but it changed it only for this cell. So we can click on this cell, and instead of it saying pause squat, we can say equals, what am I going to do here? Click this one. Do I want this to be an absolute or a relative cell reference? I want it to be an absolute reference. I want it, oops, only to refer to this cell. So let's put those dollar signs in. And now it will refer to this cell. So if I change this now to Bulgarian split squats, great, it's going to change it here. So I would do this for everything. Exercise name, the label, sets, reps, percentage of 1 rep max, and load can stay the same because it's always going to refer to this percentage of 1 rep max anyways. And last at RP is where we have the athlete calculate things. So there we have it, guys. That's our little first introduction here into Excel. In future videos, I think we'll go over formatting, how to make things look nice, common mistakes to avoid, more complicated formulas and ways to accomplish things. If you guys have specific questions about something, make sure to ask, and I'll be glad to go over it as we go forward. Thanks very much.